Hi, I am Kara Martin, and we are looking at the Center School District. That's where I currently serve. So let's first talk about where Center is located. It is actually located within the city limits of Kansas City. We are the zip codes of about 64131, 64137. But let's look at KC as a whole first. So KC, the city limits, has about 490,000 people, and most of the citizens are between the ages of 18 and 65. That's 64% of that population. The median age is 37.6, and only 23% of that 490,000 is under 18. The median household income for KC city limits is $52,000, and the median property value is about $148,000. As I said before, Center is part of Kansas City, but we are not the Kansas City Public School District. We are south of Kansas City Public School District. So where Kansas City School District ends at about 80th, we pick up from there, and we go from State Line to Troost/Prospect. There's also another district, Grandview, which is its own city, but it also has some students that actually have Kansas City addresses that attend their schools. And then there's Hickman Mills, which also has Kansas City residents that attend their schools. So we're a small district. Some of the issues that we face as a small district, but of a urban city. Most of our families are one of two options. They are either middle class or they are considered of poverty, low SES status. We have the two extremes. Middle class looks very extreme compared to the students that we have, the low SES grouping. Our low SES families are blue-collar workers, and most have a high school education at the most, and they're working about 2 jobs. Our middle-class families have attended college, but only about one parent is a college graduate. And then we like to joke that we are the forgotten community of Kansas City. We are part of Kansas City, so all that happens in Kansas City affects us, but we are typically forgotten as being actually part of Kansas City when it comes to regulations and money and all that kind of stuff. Here's some other things in our sociological inventory. Economy is a struggle in South KC. We have several big companies and corporations that have moved in, but because they've gotten tax abatements, they are not paying taxes to the local economy, so it's not helping us out any. Violence is on the rise in South Kansas City, so there's a joke that's made on the news frequently that the violence is moving south, and it's true. This is also impacting our students because they are now experiencing more trauma than we've ever actually experienced before. And then community diversity, we say that we're diverse, but really we only have 2 extremes. We have white and we have brown. And then our white families tend to be middle class and our brown families tend to be low SES. We again are a very Saturday community that's going to come up over and over and over again because of how stark and how obvious the segregation is. Marlboro, though, is a very well-known area in our community. We have Marlboro cleanup days. We have a Marlboro community center. It's located in between 2 of our low SES schools. So that is one of our, for that community, that is a very well-known and a very distinct thing that they hold with pride. In the Redbridge area, they also hold all of the Redbridge shopping centers, and there's some Redbridge carnivals that go on, and they hold that with pride, and that's our middle class area. But most of our families do not leave South Kansas City. If they go to college, they leave to go off to maybe UMKC, usually it's a MCC or JCC, and they come right back and they raise their families here. So that's good for us. We have a large alumni population that teaches for us and that returns to help out with whatever we need. We are a very religious community. The Midwest is known for having a church on every corner. Well, we have 4 churches on every corner because that's how many spots there are. Or at every intersection, there's 4 churches. So, again, traditions are a big deal. When we tried to cancel the homecoming parade due to safety issues, the community got highly upset, so we had to continue that this year. So traditions are a big thing. Center does not want to lose its traditions. Boom Days is another thing we tried to reschedule, and they were like, nope, you got to have it in the fall. So we had Boom Days in the fall, just like the community wanted, because that was their tradition. And then as I spoke about the Redbridge Carnival, too, that's another thing that cannot go away. Population characteristics, we talked a little bit about this previously, but we know that most of our population is between the age of 18 and 64. There's actually more females than males in Kansas City. And then we have 60% of our population is white alone, 30% is black. Then we go down to Hispanic being next, and then 3 or more races is also a large group of our community. There are multiple means of communicating with our families. Usually it's the news, newspaper, and the internet. We do have 37 radio stations, and a lot of families do get their news from the radio, but depending on which station you're listening to is what version of the news you're getting. The KC Star, Jackson County Advocate are the 2 newspapers that I see students reading in classrooms when we do pull up. And by reading, I mean going to those websites and looking at the information online. But they still are in publication. And the call is actually strong amongst our older community. Kansas City Hispanic News is a newspaper that is growing in popularity in our district as our immigrant and Hispanic population, Latinx population increases. Again, those news stations 4, 5, and 9, and then the various stations that they also air news on. But as we all know, the internet and social media tends to be how we communicate currently. There are 3 community groups that are not really that active, to be quite honest. There's a South Kansas City Coalition, that's the most active. South Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, it's there. And then we have South Patrol of the KCPD. And they actually, when I was thinking about it, may not be considered a community group per se, but they help out and they are involved in our community. And our South Patrol, that is like our station, that's our community gathering. There's a room there that we can rent out. They have hold mediations for us with families. So they are one of our community groups, in my opinion. Our leadership, we have church leaders, and we have a lot of churches, but we have about 3 big churches. They each support one school. The mayor of KC, he's one of the leaders. We have a former school board president who is actually highly influential in our community still. And then our previous superintendent and his assistant are highly involved in our community. Our current superintendent is actually interim, so he has the influence, but not like this previous superintendent did. So it's kind of weird. And our current board president was there's transitions going on there too, just to say the least. So our former board president has a lot of influence there. And when I was thinking about that, it actually is really interesting that it's our previous leadership that actually has more influence amongst our community than our current leadership. And that's because these individuals are very well spoken and they come from a sincere place. I even think about the 3 church leaders that are well known in our community. You can see the sincerity in their eyes when they're talking with you. They're also well versed in the Kansas City community, so they understand Center and how it relates to the rest of Kansas City and the history of Center in Kansas City and this back and forth debacle that we'll get into in just a second. And then also, as we've been looking at in this course, these leaders have an ability to tell a story like none other. They can hook you and grab you and make you feel human and vulnerable, and they make you feel like, oh, this is going on in their life too, and they understand where I am as a human. And I think that's just a unique characteristic that makes these leaders so successful. So our economic conditions, our top 5 industries, 5 is food service, 4 is healthcare, 3 is retail, 2 is manufacturing, and 1 surprised me was wholesales. So the shipping of goods and that whole market. And then about 16.5% of our families do live, of our population, not of our families, I'm sorry, do live in what is considered poverty by all definitions. So here's some more information about our businesses. I kind of enjoy this information, especially when it comes to minority-owned business and women-owned businesses. So I found this little piece of tidbit useful and this is Kansas City as a whole, but we have 2 distinct minority businesses that support us. They're also women-owned businesses. We have a veteran-owned business that supports us in South Kansas City in the Center School District. So I like that. Here's our mayor, Quentin Lucas. He was just voted in. And the fiscal year budget for the previous year was $1.5